Hello everyone, my name is Sierra Green and I work as an archivist at the Heinz History Center. I've had the pleasure of corresponding with many of you as we prepare for the Scottish Genealogy Workshop on Sunday, May 31st. In addition to the incredible offerings that we'll be providing, thanks to the expertise of Paul Milner and the archivists at the Presbyterian Historical Society, we also wanted to give you a sense of what kind of resources we have available for research at the Heinz History Center to help you trace your local Scottish and Scots-Irish ancestors. So as a result, we prepared a virtual presentation that you'll be able to view at your convenience to learn more about what we have. So at this point, I'll begin sharing my screen and we can dive into the resources that are available. So here's an outline of where we're headed over the next little bit. First, we're going to talk about the Heinz History Center as an organization, as well as its history, in order to help you understand the relationship between who we are, our mission, and then the sources we have available for genealogical research. From there, we're going to dive into the genealogical resources themselves, spend some time getting to know them better. And then we're going to talk about some strategies that you can successfully use in order to effectively do research in a library and archive setting like ours at the Heinz History Center. Then we're going to dig into a little bit of the nuts and bolts about how you can best prepare for your visit when we reopen to researchers who are interested in genealogical pursuits. So just a quick history of us as an organization. We trace our roots to the 19th century. We were formally established as the Historical Society of Western Pennsylvania in 1879. And from the very outset, it's in our name, our emphasis was really tracing and collecting the stories of Western Pennsylvania citizens, residents from that point onward. As you would imagine, and for those of you that are familiar with the history of historical societies in the 1870s and beforehand, and following as well, the focus really at that point was documenting the stories of prominent Western Pennsylvania families, as well as the businesses and organizations in which they were active. So in knowing this, we get a better understanding of those early collections that were gathered during this time period and beyond. And considering those of you that have a research interest in tracing your Scots and Scots-Irish ancestors to this period of time, thinking about the 19th century and beforehand and following, a number of those individuals do trace Scots-Irish and Scottish ancestry and heraldry. So as a result, I think that there's a really nice array of overlap between the early collecting interest of us as an organization and then many of you who are looking to trace your ancestors and finding insights into their stories. Now, for the sake of time, I want to fast forward a little bit and talk about the evolution of our organization over time. So beginning in the 1980s and then moving into the 1990s and even today, there was a movement and a shift to establish a regional history museum. And in short, this was in response to really the fall of, or the decline of local industry, and thinking about that, the fact that these characteristics that had defined our city and our region for such a long time, thinking about the decline of industries such as the steel industry, seeing the exodus of those defining industries really caused a real sense of concern about where this history was going, thinking that it was in danger of being preserved, and wanting there to be a regional history museum where local people and as well as people from across the world can come and learn more about this region and its identity. So as a result, there became this movement to establish a regional history museum. And this kind of these feelings of concern and these efforts really tied closely to a rise of social history. So this idea of the value in understanding in greater depth kind of the experiences of everyday residents of a given area, a given community, and that those stories held value for historical inquiry and for increasing our understanding as well of the region and its residents, that this is a very important part of the broader story. So as a result, there was a real broadening of the collecting scope of us as an organization and really defining what are some priorities for, and what are some of the stories that we really want to tell in the museum, and what are some stories that we really want to gather and preserve. And so, so our collections expanded and our holdings expanded as a result. I have an image here that's really kind of a depiction of where we are at the present as a result of this institutional history. And again, there are many, many details and nuances that I have not covered within this slide, but just to give you in a very broad sense of our evolution as an organization, because I believe that it informs the collections that we have that are open for research. So in 2020, we have thousands of archival collections that are open in research, and they vary widely in size from one folder or one item all the way to hundreds of boxes. And I have an image here of our D room storage area. And as you would imagine, there exists an A room to a C room. There's also an E room, and then we have another offsite storage area. So with all of these collections that have been gathered over the history of our organization, it can be overwhelming to navigate them and to be able to identify which resources, which source material is most relevant to your research interests. So the rest of this talk will be dedicated to what it is that we have and how you can effectively seek and find the resources that are most interest for your family history. Okay, so what I thought I'd do in covering the types of sources that we have is start in the territory that you all as genealogists are perhaps most familiar with. And then as we proceed and cover other sources as the presentation goes along, it's likely that you'll be less and less familiar and maybe don't have personal experience researching in these types of collections. So again, we're going to start in what I imagine is familiar territory and just looking at city directories, maps, books, and newspapers. And you can certainly follow along in your handout. There are many of the links that are actually all of the links that are in this presentation correspond to links in your handout. And in many instances, there are even more details in your handout that are not included in this presentation. Okay. So city directories and maps are incredible foundational resources for genealogists, right? Of course, given that our focus as an organization is on Western Pennsylvania, we wanted to highlight the fact that we have robust collections of city directories documenting Pittsburgh and the environs, in particular Allegheny City. Our collection spans from 1813 all the way to 1974. And again, these are tactile city directories that you can pull off this shelf yourself. It's actually self-service, and flip through these city directories at your leisure when our organization is open. In the meantime, though, there's an incredible collection of digitized city directories that cover Pittsburgh that run from 1815 all the way to 1945. And alongside these, there's a really helpful online user guide. The link to this user guide, as well as to the digitized collections of these city directories, are in your handout. Now, if you had ancestors that did not settle in Pittsburgh, but that did settle elsewhere in Western Pennsylvania, we do have a small collection of city directories that relate to other parts of Western Pennsylvania. Now, these are not in any way nearly as comprehensive as the collection we have for Pittsburgh, but if you do have an interest and you've had difficulty tracking down a city directory for an area of interest for your genealogical research, please do reach out to the reference desk and we can check against our internal inventory that lists which city directories we do have for which areas and which years. Now, part and parcel with the city directories, we have a wonderful collection of historic maps at the Heinz History Center as well. So our collection runs from 1872 to 1940. That's online at Historic Pittsburgh. Hopkins maps within our broader collections are incredible resources that provide a street level view of different parts of the city of Pittsburgh, as well as surrounding areas too. So they're very easy to browse and to zoom in and take a closer look at on Historic Pittsburgh. And again, the more specific link direct to these resources that have been digitized and are online are available in your handout. Now again, more broadly, if your ancestors didn't settle in the Pittsburgh area, but you're interested in what kind of maps we have that pertain to the areas of interest for you, we have a wonderful internal guide to our map collection that's been put together by a volunteer as well as our chief librarian. So if you have an interest in looking at a specific map, again, similar to the city directories for Western Pennsylvania, please just contact us at the reference desk and we can search internally and get back to you as far as what we have relative to a specific area and what years are covered. Now, in addition, our library collection has a really robust array of published books, published materials that pertain to Scottish and Scots-Irish genealogical research. So some of the types of books that I wanted to highlight to kind of give you a sense of what we have are anniversary publications pertaining to different churches. We also have neighborhood and regional histories that I think are really helpful in getting a contextual understanding of the area in which your ancestors settled. We also have histories that were published very specific to the Scottish and Scots-Irish settlements within Western Pennsylvania and throughout the state. And I think, again, from a contextual perspective, those are really helpful. We also have published genealogies and family histories. We also have guides to church records that come in handy as well as more generalized guides to genealogical research for the ethnic groups of Scottish and Scots-Irish ancestors. We have a wonderful, robust yearbook collection if you're interested in tracing more contemporary ancestors. And all of these materials are really easily searchable via our online catalog. And again, there's a link to in your handout to our holdings online. Now, in the meantime, given that we're not open for research at this time, again, I want to point you all to Historic Pittsburgh, where there's a really wonderful and robust digitized book collection that is keyword searchable and available online. And again, that link is in your handout. So I have, like on display on this page is one of the examples of the family histories that relates to the local glass industry, and in particular, one glass house that is tied to the Bakewell family and was also tied to the Campbell family, which traced their roots to Scotland. So this is just a great example of one of our family histories genealogies in our collection that does have a tie to Scottish ancestry. Okay. Additionally, we have a really wonderful and robust newspaper collection, and there's some specific newspapers that I wanted to highlight for you all. So in the vein of tactile newspapers that have not been yet put up online, but are available for research, and the History Center being, one of the few, if not the only repository in which you can get access to. One such example is the McKees Rocks Gazette. So this newspaper runs from 1893 to 2012. It was recently donated to us, and some of the earlier issues were recently digitized that run from the late 19th to the early 20th century. And we're hopeful that it will be uploaded to Historic Pittsburgh in the near future, so it'll be keyword searchable and much more easily search across and navigable. But in the meantime, we do have the full run of the newspaper physically within our holdings. So it's a wonderful resource if your ancestors overlapped with that area of the McKees Rocks region. Additionally, we also have, and this is newly uploaded to Historic Pittsburgh, is the Echo. So if you had ancestors who were incarcerated at the Western Penitentiary here in Pittsburgh during the period of the 1920s to 1930, definitely go on Historic Pittsburgh to search within the holdings of the Echo. It's an incredible newspaper that was discovered by our chief librarian, and thankfully we've been able to digitize the newspaper thanks to a grant and put it up online, and it's an incredible insight. It provides incredible insights into the goings-on of the Western State Penitentiary during this time period. You can also check on our magazine, the Western Pennsylvania History Magazine. In order to attain some additional insights into the Echo, there was recently an article published by Mary Jones, our chief librarian, within the LNA collections, LNA treasures highlight within our magazine that provides kind of more of a contextual introduction to this incredible newspaper holding that we have here at the History Center. Beyond individual newspapers that we have within our collection, I also wanted to highlight our newspapers.com subscription. So when we are open to researchers again, people are able to come in and make use of our newspapers.com subscription for free on site anytime during our open research hours. This is an incredible resource for those that haven't had a chance to take a look, but it searches across newspapers all over the country and does have a pretty strong representation of digitized newspapers of Pittsburgh and then also throughout Western Pennsylvania. It's fairly intuitive and user-friendly. As the reference team, once we're back up and running and we're open for researchers, we're open for research. We're able to provide kind of some guidelines and introductions to newspapers.com to help you get started. Additionally, our online catalog is a great resource to search in the meantime to get a sense of our newspaper holdings. If you're looking for a particular newspaper and don't see it coming up in our online catalog, please do feel free to reach out to our reference team. Again, this is another instance where our chief librarian has done a great amount of work to inventory our newspaper collection, and we have an internal guide that we're able to easily search across. So if there's a title that you're not seeing come up in our online catalog, please do reach out to us and we can search across our holdings and see if we have anything pertinent for your research interests. Okay. So another source that, that most of you certainly are aware of and may also have had some experience navigating are records relating to and deriving from churches. And of course, you know, our friends at the Presbyterian Historical Society in Philadelphia are without a doubt an incredible, in fact, the premier site for records pertaining to the Presbyterian Church all throughout the state of Pennsylvania and of course nationally. And when we look at our holdings at the Heinz History Center, we do have some modest original materials pertaining to some Presbyterian churches in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. And I have the list of those that are in your handout, and I wanted to highlight one of them here this morning. So we do have a small aggregate of materials from the Beulah Presbyterian Church. So this church was founded in Churchill, Pennsylvania, which is east of the city of Pittsburgh, in 1784. And this congregation was established by Scots-Irish settlers. Among the earliest members was Dunning McNair. The church itself was also known as Bullock's Pen Church, and is believed to be among the first Christian churches founded west of the Alleghenies. So this is a small but incredibly mighty collection that we have pertaining to this particular congregation. And I want to highlight in particular some of the early records that document rites of passage within the church. So the pastor's notebook that's within the collection seems to be the place where earliest records of marriages exist, at least within this collection. And the earliest that we can find that's documented within this notebook is 1820, documenting a marriage. Now, there are also records documenting the addition of members to this church. And when we look particularly at the marriage records running from the 1840s to the 1860s, it's actually fairly sparse, the amount of information that's documented by the celebrant, predominantly just the name of the bride and groom as well as the date of the marriage. But it looks as if, as time goes on, beginning in the 1860s, so starting in 1863 and then going till 1875, there's also information specifically about townships of origin of the bride and groom that are celebrating the wedding. So there's some additional information as time goes on. There's also some cemetery records that are within the collection that certainly have genealogical research value, as well as a burial list. And then there is a generated a website that documents the history of this congregation that is linked on this slide and in your handout. If Beulah Presbyterian Church is of interest for your genealogical research, I definitely recommend giving that a look. Also, too, I know that the Presbyterian Historical Society does have holdings pertaining to Beulah Presbyterian Church as well, so I'd recommend checking out their website and following Jenny and Sonia's recommendations about research and following up on additional genealogical records pertaining to Beulah and then other churches as well. So this is an image that shows this closer up view of the of marriage records pertaining to or deriving from Beulah Presbyterian Church. And so you can see in these instances that specific townships of origin are listed because this is the point in the 1860s where the celebrant, the pastor, starts noting that detail, which of course has a lot of genealogical research value in conjunction with just the names of the spouses. Okay, shifting from church records, I also want to highlight records deriving from local government. I'm sure as genealogists, a number of you have experience doing research in a hands-on way in local county courthouses, or maybe you regularly contact local government employees and they remotely do this work for you and then send the results in the mail or via email. We also have some holdings from local government that are open for research at the History Center. And one that has a real high genealogical research value are the Pittsburgh Board of Health marriage returns. So for those that aren't familiar with returns of marriage, it's helpful to kind of think of them as a receipt that documents an individual marriage that, that took place, and predominantly within the city of Pittsburgh, although in looking through when looking through the returns of marriage, it seems that a number document the marriages of residents outside of Pittsburgh, predominantly throughout Allegheny County, but even areas outside of Allegheny County as well. So these returns of marriage were filed at the city of Pittsburgh, or with the city government, and the celebrant of marriage would have filed this return. And usually the point at which this return was filed is in really close proximity to the date of the marriage itself. And these dates are really valuable when you think about kind of returning to this collection of marriage returns and trying to find particular returns of marriage that pertain to your family members. So when we look at the collection itself, the originals run from 1875 to 1909. And there is an index that's available that was created by our friends at the Western Pennsylvania Genealogical Society that runs from 1875 to 1886. Now, these marriage returns actually predate the marriage licenses that you can find available and digitized on Family Search at the county level. And so there is a significant amount of documentation pertaining to marriages that you won't find at the county level, that you will find here at the more localized city level. So what you can find within these returns of marriage is information about ancestors that's incredibly specific and very helpful, including the names, of course, of the spouses, of the husband and the wife, the occupation of the husband, the place of residence of both preceding the marriage, as well as a listing for birthplaces. Now, generally speaking, unfortunately, most of the time, if Scotland or Ireland is listed as a birthplace of origin, usually that's about as specific as it gets. However, the information that is listed on the marriage return is really directly determined by the celebrant of the ceremony. And so as a result, if there's more specific information that is listed and contributed, it very much so, of course, still exists on the marriage return. And I've found at least one instance in which a specific town of origin in Scotland was listed on the marriage return beyond just that generalized country of origin. And it's often, of course, a key piece of information as we as genealogists attempt to make that leap from the United States and following our ancestors back to Europe. So it is incredibly helpful when that information is found, and I just definitely recommend making use of resources like these marriage returns in order to overturn every stone you can in order to find that specific town of origin. Now, a local Pittsburgh genealogist, Rich Venezia of Rich Roots Genealogy, has done some research within the city of Pittsburgh marriage returns and comparing them against the Allegheny County marriage licenses that are available online on Family Search. And he's found instances where the specific town of origin is actually listed on the city of Pittsburgh marriage return, but the country of origin is listed on the county level marriage license. And so it is worthwhile to take that extra step and ensure that if you find the county marriage license, then you know the specific date of marriage. And if you use that information and pass that along to us at the Heinz History Center, to the reference desk, or if you're able to come in and do research once we reopen, then you're able to you should be able to quickly identify the specific folder in which the marriage return of interest will be stored, and then you can take a look and see again if there's more specific information that you hadn't been aware of previously. And those dates, as I said, that specific date of filing and that specific date of marriage are incredibly important because the collection is currently organized in chronological order. And we are working on an index that goes beyond just the year 1886 and covers the whole collection, but that index is very much so still in process. And so the more information you have, the better, as whether or not you're coming on site to do research in the future, or if you're reaching out to us in the meantime. Okay. In addition to the records of local churches, as well as the records of local government, we do have incredible collections that also document genealogists who have come before us and have done incredible research and have entrusted those materials to us at the Heinz History Center. So I wanted to highlight an incredible collection that was put together by Josiah V. Thompson. So Josiah Thompson was a native himself of Uniontown, Pennsylvania, and he was born in 1854. Now, throughout his life, he rose to quite a level of prominence professionally. He became, he came to be at the helm of the First National Bank of Uniontown, and having very much so it being a part of his family's business. So he ascends to that position of leadership in 1889 and was really known for his incredible work ethic and his dedication to running a tight ship. And so he insisted that his employees should not indulge at all in alcohol or tobacco because he felt it impinged on productivity. And he was also known himself to have been an incredibly tireless worker, so he kept up with his own correspondence and was also known at some certain points throughout his professional career to have even kept such hours as to necessitate him spending nights in the office. Now, when he transitioned and concluded his professional career, it seems that he took that diligence and that dedication into his genealogical, his passion for genealogy. And so he traveled all throughout this region, as well as at least into Ohio and Indiana too, pursuing genealogical research. And so he certainly culled the information that was available within county courthouses at the time, also visiting cemeteries. In addition, he would spend a large amount of time too with the relatives of family lines that he was really interested in, and directly transcribing and documenting information that was conveyed by these elder Southwestern Pennsylvania residents. So thinking of that almost as if like a genealogical interview or oral history in which he's taking down diligent notes of information that helps further glean insights into the genealogical research that was of interest to him at the time. He also transcribed information from family Bibles that he came across, and he undertook this work from up until the early 1930s. And sadly, I think he passed away at this point and had experienced some financial difficulties at the point of his death, but certainly throughout his retirement had pursued genealogy quite passionately and has left behind a remarkable record of the work that he undertook. And this work, when we look at it, it picks up in 1897 and runs to the early 1930s and 1931. It filled 28 volumes. And if you look at this screen, we can see this incredible like red leather bound volume is just one of the journals that he kept throughout his time in undertaking genealogical research. So there are 28 volumes, and thankfully over time there have been transcriptions that have been made of all of the information that live within these volumes. And there's also remarkably indexes that are available too. They span, they're divided in half. And so there are two indexes, one that covers volumes 1 to 14, the other covers volumes 15 to 28. I've listed on this slide some of the surnames that are prominently featured, including Bell, Boyd, Brown, Campbell, Carruthers, Kasner, Connett, Dunlap, Finley, Jack, Johnson, Jones, Markle, Porter, Redburn, Rothermel, Thompson, and then many, many, many others. So this collection is available for research again once we reopen. Additionally, too, microfilmed copies of these volumes are available through the Family History Library as well. But the transcriptions and the indices are incredibly helpful to navigate the wealth of genealogical research that Josiah undertook throughout the course of his life. So an incredible resource, and definitely worth an inquiry if you have local Scots and Scots-Irish ancestors. Okay. We also have an incredible array of the collections of local families, of local southwestern Pennsylvania families that have strong Scottish collections, or connections rather. The first collection I'd like to highlight are the William Gibson papers. So William Gibson emigrated from Scotland, and his profession was a coverlet weaver. Through this collection of correspondence that we have, we know that he initially settled in New York before migrating ultimately to Pittsburgh, and then residing for some time in Washington County before living the rest of his life in Elizabeth, Pennsylvania. So we know, again, based on this correspondence, that he spent much of his time as an adult living in Western Pennsylvania. And the collection itself is actually our letters that span from 1803 to 1849, and they come from William's siblings and other family members who were still living in Scotland after he emigrated to the United States. It's remarkable when you look at this collection and see the exchange between members of family who are still living in Scotland and the references they make to their own lived experiences. I think, even if William Gibson is not your ancestor, if you have coverlet weavers in your family, in your own genealogy, or if you have ancestors who emigrated to the United States around this time, and you know based on your genealogical research that some family members remained in Scotland, then this is a great collection that you can directly encounter yourself coming in for research at the Heinz History Center, and it'll get you closer to at least some people's lived experiences as far as the nature of the split between family members who elected to come to the United States and those who remained in Scotland. Now, in William's case, there are letters written from all over Scotland to him, and they provide insights into, in many instances, really poignant insights into regrets about not coming to the United States, mentions and reflections on current life in Scotland at the time. So in the case of this slide, I have a scan of an image of a letter that was written by William's sister Elizabeth to him in 1816. And as you read the front page of the letter, you see that since his coming over to the United States, she's relaying that she had 8 children. And of those 8, only 5 are still living, that she's lost 3 children in the intervening time. Also, too, we can glean that that the weaving business is very much so something that that spans their family. She's making references to the difficulties experienced in the coverlet weaving trade in Scotland, and she also in this letter makes reference to the fact that William had corresponded earlier, saying how prosperous this industry and trade is in Western Pennsylvania as he's finding it at this point in time. And what's interesting is looking at this interplay between brother and sister. Elizabeth goes on to say that she's very happy to hear that he's encountered such prosperity, and she's really begging him to recall that he apparently does owe her some money and that she is in quite a bit of need of that. And so she's kind of laying out the circumstances under which she will receive, she would like to receive this payment from him, and providing other familial and industry updates as a result. And I think that these and some of the other letters within William's collection, again, provide us an avenue for more of a personalized understanding of insights into the lived experiences of Scottish American immigrants, and then also the relationships and the people that they left behind in Scotland as well. And one of the things that I think is a real advantage in researching Scottish and Scots-Irish ancestors is that at least some of the time you will come across the evidence that's left behind in a language that's very approachable for us. These letters are written in English, and in this case, actually, we even have partial transcriptions of the letters. And so if you take the time to come in and take a look at this collection, It's actually fairly user-friendly, and they're with the transcription, it's like a lower barrier of entry compared to those of us that have ancestors who spoke different languages, or perhaps, of course, in instances too where our ancestors didn't have the ability to convey in writing or leave behind in writing any direct documentation of their life and their lived experiences. Now, similarly, we also have the John Morton papers. So this is a really interesting small collection documenting John Morton, who was born in 1783 in Scotland. And he emigrated to the United States in 1809 during his mid-20s. And based on the diary that we have a partial transcription of, he was engaged in the stone cutting trade here in Western Pennsylvania. So the collection itself runs from 1809 to 1812. In this case, we do not have the original diary, but rather have a partial transcription of some of the entries that were given to us in the 1960s. And what's remarkable is that this partial transcription covers the years 1809 to 1812, which is the span of time that John was in the United States and that settled, and when he settled in the Pittsburgh area. And it's incredible reading through these diary entries. What themes are covered within this collection are remarkable firsthand insight into his passage from Scotland to the United States. It spanned 8 weeks, and the diary also covers his early impressions of the United States, including Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. So you get some remarkable firsthand insights into early 19th century immigration of a Scottish person ultimately coming to settle in Pittsburgh. One of the things that I love about this collection are digging really into and getting kind of those firsthand insights into Pittsburgh from the perspective of a Scottish immigrant. So he remarks extensively about the quality of the land as well as the topography. He was really struck by the hilly nature of our region, and of course that's something that remains quite constant over time and something we can identify as 21st century residents of this region. He also, within this diary, definitely makes multiple references to social gatherings of Scottish Americans, both in the Philadelphia area as well as in Pittsburgh, and that can be truly remarkable and helpful in kind of reconstituting the connections between Scottish Americans during this time in Western Pennsylvania. He also remarks upon the quality of the roads too, as well as the soil, and they're just it's just a remarkable resource to get insight into this region during this time period. So again, if you have ancestors who you know came over from Scotland and settled in the Pittsburgh area during this time, stepping into John's shoes and really getting some vantage point as far as what his travel was like and what his impressions were will help you get closer to what may have been your ancestors' experience as well. Now, John's journey in time in Pittsburgh came to an abrupt close in 1812, much earlier than he would have expected because of the passing of his father. And so he returned to Scotland to take over his father's estate at that time. But we do know that one of his nephews, who he later overtook guardianship of, did come back to the United States and settle later on in his life. But we know that John's time was cut short in the Pittsburgh area. Okay. So going from family papers, another source that you all may have familiarity with are funeral home records. So I'm sure a lot of you have experiences, of course, culling the incredible information that are available at grave sites and cemeteries of ancestors. And I want to encourage you all to consider funeral home records as a wonderful resource as well. So I have one example of one of our largest funeral home collection that spans quite a bit of time. So the H. Samson Funeral Home was founded in 1859 and was located formerly in downtown Pittsburgh, but also was in the Oakland neighborhood as well. Samson himself was an innovator in the field of mortuary science, So he is credited with innovations in the vein of embalming liquids, of creating the semblance and experience of a funeral home. Also, he was the first to have a crematory within city limits, and then also made broad use and was an innovator in the utilization of hearses as well. So in addition to managing the funerals of prominent Pittsburghers, including Scottish and Scots-Irish families within the city and the region, they were just an incredibly prolific funeral home broadly. And that testament really is within the records themselves. So the collection itself is 61 boxes, and of those 61 boxes, over 40 are what are called funeral transfer files. So these document the individual funerals that the company managed over time, and they span from 1903 to 1982. So from the years 1903 to 1919, the records run chronologically, and there's an index at the beginning of each volume that can really help you helpfully navigate the collection. And so if you have a specific ancestor that you know died, you have their death date, you're going to be able to, and you're unsure whether or not Samson managed their funeral, it should be fairly straightforward to go to that year and then look at the index at the front of the volume to determine whether or not Samson administered the funeral of your ancestor. Now, beginning in 1919 and running to 1982, the company changed the way that they organized their funeral transfer files. So they changed it up and actually organized material alphabetical by the name of the deceased person, and then within that by year. So it's actually even more intuitive. Again, if you know the specific date of death, year of death, then going to that person's name should be fairly straightforward to identify whether or not Samson administered the funeral. Now, if you're looking for earlier records, because of course the company was around in the late 1850s, beginning in 1866 and then running to 1918, there are also order books. These are more financial or administrative in nature than the funeral transfer files, but they still contain a lot of really helpful genealogical information, including information about who financially covered the funeral expenses for an individual given person. And this can be really helpful in sussing out and substantiating some connections within your family history and genealogy. So I have one example, and it is a little difficult to read, so I'll just walk through. This is an example of a funeral transfer file that dates to 1903. And it's of Miss Delia Wilson. So if we look at this funeral transfer file, we see a lot of the information that appears on a death certificate as far as the name of the deceased person, their residence at the time, the date of death, the place of death, their occupation at the point of death. In addition, it also lists any spouses, as well as, again, that kind of administrative financial information about who is covering the costs of the funeral. Additionally, cause of death is also listed, the name of the parents, as well as the birthplace of the parents too. And then there are also a lot of interesting details that you would really only find in a funeral home's records, as far as specificity on the casket, as well as some logistical information about the actual ceremony itself. Now, one of the things as well that I think is incredibly valuable within these funeral transfer files is the grid that appears in the lower left corner of each file. So what we see here is the name of a number of different Pittsburgh newspapers, as well as columns that cover each day of the week. And what we see then listed here are the days of the week and the papers in which obituaries for, in this case, Delia, are listed in the different newspapers. And then sometimes, as is the case as we see here with Delia, Samson actually cut out the obituary and pasted it within the funeral transfer file. So just an incredible amount of information that has really high genealogical research value that you can find within funeral home collections. Okay, next up are business and industry records. So kind of departing from records in which you can find the names of your ancestors, or at least learn more about what their life may have been like immigrating and settling in the Western Pennsylvania area. We also have collections that provide really wonderful insights into early significant industries in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. And so if you have ancestors that came over in the 18th and 19th century and contributed to industries here in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania, we have collections that will help you understand a bit more about what those industries were like, and in some cases even providing visuals of the work environments that your ancestors may have been most familiar with. So the first kind of industry that I wanted to highlight is the iron industry. So in this case, we have a wonderful collection that's called the Lion Shorb and Company Photographs. So this company was established in 1825, and they had operations on the south side of Pittsburgh. They were also known as Sligo Iron Works of Pittsburgh. So what makes this collection so remarkably unique and special are the fact that we have photographs of over 200 of their individual employees who are photographed with the tools used in the iron trade at the time. And the collection itself, these photographs date from 1860 and run through 1867. And there are a number, and what's even more remarkable than these individual photographs and the fact that they appear to be taken with the individual person's, their kind of organic work clothes, as well as tools of the trade within the photograph. Many of these individual images are labeled. And then in addition to that, there's also incredible information that accompanies these photographs, identifying their individual jobs. So in this case, there are over 95 different job titles. So in this case, we have an image on this slide of Mr. Hunter, who was a bloom hauler with Lion Shorb and Company, and we see a piece of bloom that he's holding with his hand. So Mr. Hunter, the bloom hauler, is just one of over 200 workers, and again, nearly 100 different specific job titles are listed. And what's even more remarkable about this collection is its availability. So we've been able to digitize the photographs and make them available online on Historic Pittsburgh. The link is available on this slide and then also is available in your handout as well. So again, if you have ancestors who you know based on your own research contributed to and were involved in the iron industry, if you have more specific information about the specific job that they had, you can use the Lion Shorb collection to see if there was a fellow Pittsburgh or Western Pennsylvania resident who had the same job title, to get more of a visual of the clothing that they may have worn and some of the tools that they may have used in their work. Even if you don't know that level of specificity, but you do know that there is a connection to the iron industry with your ancestry, I really would recommend giving these photographs a look. They're just remarkably incredible and do provide insights into this industry during a time period in which it's fairly rare to see photo documentation. So similar to the iron industry, we also have remarkable collections documenting glass manufacturing in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania from its early days. So again, if you have ancestors who came over in the 18th and 19th century and contributed to the glass industry, here are some of the collections that we believe would really help you in kind of understanding and growing in your contextual knowledge of this industry and what it looked like in Pittsburgh and throughout Western Pennsylvania. So some of the collections that document early glass houses are Bakewell Page and Bakewell records, as well as the Bakewell McKnight family papers, and also the Denny O'Hara family papers. We also have some early editions of Harper's Weekly illustrations that again provide some visuals of work within a glass house in the 19th century. We also have two, interestingly, collections that directly derive from Scottish settlers in Western Pennsylvania who were significant, instrumental in establishing and contributing to the glass industry in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. So we have the Bryce Brothers and Lennox Incorporated records, and we also have the PPG Incorporated records, again, both of which have very strong ties to Scottish Americans who contributed to these, and in the case of the Bryce Brothers and Lennox Incorporated records, founded these companies within the glass industry. Additionally, I would be remiss if I did not highlight the importance of the resources that we have beyond our own archives relating to the glass industry. So we have the exhibit Glass Shattering Notions that is in our museum. Additionally, too, we have an accompanying book that was published by the curator of this exhibit, Ann Mataraz. So in the meantime, while we're closed to the public, there's a wonderful resource page available on the History Center's website that's linked to in your handout that documents this exhibit and provides some visuals and some insights into the exhibit while you can't visit it in person quite yet. Additionally, the book is a remarkable wealth of information about the history of the glass industry in Pittsburgh and Western Pennsylvania. So again, if you have ancestors that you know contributed significantly to this industry, then it's worthwhile, without a doubt, to make use of some of the more locally specific resources that are available at the Heinz History Center. Okay. So throughout the course of this presentation thus far, some of you may not have found or discovered any personal significant connections to your own family history up until this point. I don't want you to emerge from this virtual lecture thinking that the History Center doesn't have anything to offer you and your ancestors, because I just want to relay that what I've highlighted is really the tip of the iceberg as far as what we have. So the best resource that you can make use of to get a sense of what it is that we have and to try to find connections with your ancestors is our online catalog. And before you just dive in and begin searching within our online catalog, I have some tips to and some prompting questions for you all to keep in mind as you prepare to search within our collections and really make the most of what it is that we have and try to find those connections with your genealogy and with your ancestors. So my recommendations are really to pack up your Ancestors Fan Club. And if you're not familiar with the acronym FAN, FAN stands for Friends, Associates, and Neighbors. So think about your ancestors that you know, that you want to learn more about, and think about their friends, associates, and neighbors that you've been able to discover their names and learn more about them. And then think about bringing them to the archives. And take a step back from them individually, and take a step back too of searching just by using their names. And what I want you to do is, with those ancestors in mind, think about these questions. So which areas and neighborhoods did they call home? Which churches and synagogues were they likely to have attended? Which industries benefited from their labor? Which beneficial or civic organizations might have had their membership? If we take a step back from our ancestors and think about these bigger ties to who they are, that will help us get closer to finding resources that are in archives that will then help us grow in our understanding of who they were and what their life may have been like. And the reason that I recommend that you all explore these questions and think about approaching your research from these angles is that you're more likely to come across great collections of sources like those that I've highlighted thus far if you take this approach rather than remaining specific to just searching for the names of your ancestors. And all throughout this process, I really recommend consulting with archivists and librarians who are working for organizations that are tied to your family's own history. we as archivists and librarians, we are in the work of connecting researchers with the collections, with our holdings. We really enjoy that work, and it's the core of what we do. We spend our days getting to know the collections, and it really brings us joy making connections between our researchers and what they're interested in and the collections and resources that we have within our collections. So don't feel as if you need to do this alone. So keeping that in mind, again, thinking about taking a step back from your ancestor and thinking more about where they lived, who they worked for, where their places of worship were, and what different organizations may they have been affiliated with. Keeping all of this in mind, I have a little bit of a tutorial of how you can navigate our online catalog to turn up results that might be of interest for your own genealogical research. So here's the landing page of our online catalog, and again, the link is in your handout. What I'd recommend doing is kind of mixing and matching different terms and localities in order to kind of seek out and find resources that specifically relate to your ancestor. And again, kind of thinking about those bigger, the bigger kind of groupings and categories that they belong to. So since starting with the advanced search, all you have to do is go to the search, hover over the search button, and then click on advanced search. And then in this case, say for example, you know that your ancestor settled in the Churchill area. We could just search Churchill, but then we'll get all results that relate to that area. Now that might be of interest, but if you want to get more specific and look for anything that has a Scots-Irish connection or a Scottish connection, then you can enter these two terms within the advanced search box. And what I recommend doing is just using Word as a specific field in both cases, and then making sure that the and button is selected. So this is telling our catalog to search for anything that includes the term Scots-Irish and then the term Churchill. So we see if we search those two together, we get a collection that we'd spent some time talking about, the Beulah United Presbyterian Church records. And you can click on this link and get a more detailed description of the collection, or you can just click on this URL here, and that will get you to the specific guide to this collection that will give us many more details. And this guide is called a finding aid. So this is the landing page for the Beulah Presbyterian Church finding aid. And there's a lot of helpful information about the collection that will help you figure out from home whether or not it's worthwhile to either get in touch with us and see if we can take a look in the collection for you, or for you to make a research trip to the Library and Archives of the History Center. So some information that you really want to pay attention to within this finding aid is the collection number. When you come in and request this number or request this collection, you'll need this number to give to our reference staff so that they can pull the appropriate collection for you. You also want to look at the date range of the collection. So again, knowing when your ancestor most likely was affiliated with this church or was affiliated with an organization or lived in a particular area, the more specific that you can get, the better. And it'll help you determine whether or not this collection of sources most likely will have materials relating to your ancestor. So in this case, we see that there's a very broad date range from 1811 to 1984, but then more specific date ranges of 1811 to 1834, and then picking up in 1983 and 1984. Now we also can see the extent of this collection. And so we see that it's a small collection, only one box, and this is another very important piece of information to help you get a sense of how large the collection is and whether or not it's feasible for you to look through all of it, or if you really want to make use of this information that's available online in the finding aid and get more specific in order to be able to determine what parts of the collection are most likely of interest for your family history research. As the finding aid goes on, we see that there's really helpful sections that dive into the history of the organization, in this case, of course, Beulah Presbyterian Church. And then additionally, this section, the scope and content note, is incredibly valuable to researchers. It provides narrative style, a description of what's in the collection, what items make up the collection from start to finish. And this is a place too where the archivists who cared for the collection and who prepared it for researchers, where they can leave behind really helpful details about some of the strengths of the collection and perhaps weaknesses of the collection as well. So I really would recommend spending some time with this part of the finding aid. It really helps you familiarize yourself with the types of sources that you'll find within the collection, and again, give you some clues and hints as far as where you might go, again, to find the sources that are most relevant for your research. Next up, in many finding aids is the collection or inventory, also known as the container list. So this gives a very specific breakdown of what's in the collection, as you will find within each box and within each folder. So we can see here the listings for box 1 and then folder 1 and then so forth. So again, this is where knowing specific information about your ancestor and their connection with a given church, a place of worship, or a business, or an organization is really helpful. So you can use the dates that the archivist has listed within the finding aid associated with the specific material in a folder to identify whether or not it's most likely that there's going to be information about your ancestor within that given source material. So in this case, if you know that your ancestor was affiliated with Beulah Presbyterian Church, but in the earlier years in the 19th century, then you're most likely mostly interested in the administrative records that are in folder 1. Now, you might also maybe take a look at the historical material that runs from the 1880s to 1967. But again, you want to make use of this information that's available remotely before embarking on a research visit in person or before contacting the reference team at the Library and Archives of the History Center. The more specific, the better. And also, given that you're the one that's undertaken such an incredible amount of research on your own family history, making use of that knowledge and pairing it with the information that we have online of a collection really then primes you to make the most of a collection. But again, we are, without a doubt, interested in helping you facilitate your genealogical research inquiry. Now, in searching our online catalog, you will find in the intervening time, or you will find in our catalog, that some of our holdings have links to them that not just link to an online finding aid that you can use to prepare for an in-person research visit or to reach out to us for some remote research or collections access. We also have, in some cases, thanks to the work of our chief librarian, some of our published materials, there is an electronic access link where you can actually review this book and search across it because it's been digitized and put up online. So it's a great example of some work that you all can do remotely from home during this time, again, before we reopen to researchers as an organization. Here I wanted to make sure to highlight the resources that we have available at the Detre Library and Archives, and just giving you a sense of what it looks like to prepare for a research visit. So of course at this time, unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, we are closed to researchers, but we really recommend that you keep an eye on the History Center's website to receive updates on when we will be able to have researchers again in our space, and it's something that we're very eager to do, but certainly when undertaken, considering of course safety and keeping in mind everyone's safety, staff and researchers alike. But in the meantime, please do, if you have a remote research inquiry, please do feel free to contact us. So I have the email address of the Library and Archives at the History Center. I also have my email address here if you have an inquiry specific to this presentation that you'd like to follow up with. I do want to emphasize as well that once we do reopen, generally speaking, if you want to come in and do research within the Library and Archives, Admission is free. You do not have to pay admission to come in and do research in our library and archives. The only instance in which you need to pay admission is when you'd like to see and view the museum exhibits. Speaking of exhibits, I also wanted to highlight, in addition to the glass shattering notions exhibit, some other exhibits that are available at the Heinz History Center that relate to Scottish and Scots-Irish ancestors include our clash exhibit documenting the French and Indian War that is on the 5th floor of our museum. Additionally, the Fort Pitt Museum that's at the Point in downtown Pittsburgh is an incredible resource if you're interested in frontier history and have ancestors who connect to that period of frontier history surrounding the forts at the Point. Additionally, too, we have a remarkable exhibit on Pittsburgh innovators over time. And so if you have ancestors who overlap with prominent Western Pennsylvanians who have Scottish and Scots-Irish ancestry, then that exhibit is definitely worth a visit as well. And again, kind of looping back around to some of the opening remarks that I had, if you do have ties to prominent Western Pennsylvania families that settled in the 19th century and beforehand in Western Pennsylvania, definitely do think about searching those names within our online catalog. We may have holdings directly relating to them that may be of research interest to you. In the meantime, I want to wish you all just such safety and good health throughout this time. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any follow-up questions. If there's any way we could be of assistance with your research visit. And I hope that you all enjoy so much the offerings of the Scottish Genealogy Workshop, and have a great day.